All right, welcome to this explainer. Quick question before we jump in. Think about a time you felt completely, totally powerless in a situation. Got it? Now, was it because you cared just a little too much about the outcome? Well, today, we're diving deep into this stark, uncompromising, and honestly, absolutely fascinating philosophy of power and emotional control. We're unpacking a source that literally strips away everything we're traditionally taught about relationships and vulnerability. Instead, it presents this fiercely Machiavellian view of the world. It basically argues that true power, it doesn't come from connection. No, it comes from a highly disciplined state of detachment. Whether you agree with it or not, understanding this framework will completely change how you view social dynamics. So let's get right into it. The text actually hits us right out of the gate with this incredibly bold thesis. Your emotions are a chain around your neck. The source basically argues that the more you care, well, the tighter this chain becomes. I mean, think about it. Every single time you desperately want to be liked by a new colleague, or understood by a stubborn family member, or validated by a partner, you're effectively handing the leash over to someone else. You're giving them the power to hurt you, manipulate you, or even just dictate your entire mood on a random Tuesday morning. This explainer is all about what happens when you finally decide to break that chain.
Moving into Section 1, the trap of caring.
To really understand this trap, we first need to look at how society constantly tells us that caring deeply is a virtue, right? That it's a sign of strength. But this philosophy demands a massive paradigm shift. It argues that what we normally call caring is actually a hidden, profound vulnerability. The text reframes human interaction entirely, viewing caring as a literal currency. It's an emotional investment. And just like in a super volatile stock market, the person who spends the least ultimately controls the entire exchange. It's a transaction. The source argues that in literally any room, the person who feels the least, who needs the least from others, is the one who silently dictates the terms. Why? Because if you don't need anything, you can't be bought, and you sure can't be guilt-tripped into submission.
So the really crucial takeaway here is the source's totally counterintuitive claim that love doesn't win wars, detachment does. Empathy doesn't command respect. Calculated distance commands respect. The source insists that if you truly want control of your life, the absolute first step is to completely destroy your desire to be understood. You literally have to take that innate human need to be liked and burn it down to the ground. You just have to stop explaining yourself. I know, it's an incredibly intense perspective, but it firmly sets the stage for how true power is actually acquired in this worldview.
Which brings us to Section 2, Detachment as Ultimate Power.
Let's look at how this builds into the core concept of our explainer today. We're going to frame emotional detachment not as some kind of character flaw, but as the absolute ultimate cure for being manipulated or undervalued. The text introduces this concept called strategic indifference. Now pay close attention to this because it is not a lack of feeling. You aren't just becoming some heartless robot. Rather, it's the disciplined, calculated observation of situations without over-attaching to them. So, imagine your boss is harshly criticizing a project you just poured your soul into. Strategic indifference means registering the feedback perfectly, hearing every single word, but actively refusing to let your heart rate spike or your self-worth plummet. You still see everything, you still think deeply, but you refuse to tie your internal peace to external outcomes. You become an untouchable observer. And when you become neutral like that, you become unpredictable. And predictability? Well, neutrality naturally commands respect.
Let's jump into Section 3, the weapon of silence.
Okay, so shifting from the broad philosophy to the actual on-the-ground tactics outlined in the source, how is this detachment practically applied? Well, it's done by using silence and mystery as active leverage in power dynamics. Let's dive right into this specific three-step Machiavellian playbook for when someone is taking you for granted. Step 1. You step back, but not completely. Stay just close enough to be seen. Step 2. You give them just enough warmth to spark their interest and keep them engaged. And then Step 3. You turn ice cold. This calculated unpredictability creates a deep, deep sense of unease and intrigue. Instead of you frantically chasing them for approval, you force them to scramble to figure you out.
The author uses this incredibly punchy maxim here. Silence is a fortress. When you make your presence rare and your silence loud, it actively forces your opponents into a state of panic. And here's the really brilliant, memorable takeaway from this part. When you care too much, you essentially leak your strategy. You show people exactly where to strike and exactly what matters to you. But when you retreat into the fortress of your silence, they start begging, they overinvest, and ultimately, they reveal their own cards while yours remain completely hidden.
Moving on to Section 4, Reacting versus Responding.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive line in the sand drawn by the source. It's the difference between how ordinary people and powerful people handle conflict, insults, and even praise. The ordinary person reacts. Someone insults them, they get fiercely defensive and angry. Someone praises them, they get giddy and compliant. But the source argues that reaction is actually a form of slavery. You are quite literally letting someone else's words dictate your entire nervous system. On the flip side, the powerful person calculates. They see the insult, they register it, but they observe it without blinking. They maintain this calculated mental distance, and it is that exact distance that solidifies their power.
Have you ever noticed how the most powerful person in a room is rarely the loudest? The text leans into this really vivid metaphor to explain why that is. The powerful are like a snake. The snake doesn't roar to prove it's dangerous, right? It waits. It remains silent. It is utterly unreadable right up until the exact moment it acts. True power doesn't require yelling or desperately defending yourself or trying to prove your worth to a hostile room. Not at all. It requires sitting back, observing, and being totally unbothered by the noise around you.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 5, the Machiavellian mindset.
So, how do we actually apply this to everyday life? Bringing this whole overarching philosophy into focus, the source gives us a few strict rules of engagement for navigating broader societal relationships. First off, never over-explain or justify your absence to anyone. Just don't do it. Second, peacefully decline what doesn't serve you. You have to stop trading pieces of your soul just to keep the peace at work or at home. Third, walk away from arguments instead of fighting. Why? Because simply walking away rewrites the entire narrative in your favor. And lastly, let your silence be your response to betrayal. People fully expect you to explode in anger. But when you simply nod and walk away without shedding a single tear, your cold silence will terrify them far more than 1,000 screams ever could. Refusing to play the expected role generates deep fear and ultimately immense respect.
Now, what's really interesting about this next point is that it brings us to the ultimate paradox of this entire text. When you care less, people care more. By totally stripping away your desperate need for external validation, you inadvertently become a center of gravity. Weak people tend to orbit strong people, hoping for just a crumb of validation. But the person who has truly mastered detachment draws people into their world while remaining completely untouched by theirs. You aren't just a mirror reflecting their chaotic emotions back at them, you're a solid wall they crash into.
We're going to end today's explainer on this really hard-hitting challenge straight from the source material. Are you giving away your power by caring too much? It's a profound, serious question to reflect on as you go about your week. Are you constantly fighting to impress others, or are you sitting back and carefully choosing who actually gets access to your energy? Remember, according to this philosophy, true power doesn't beg, and it certainly doesn't chase. Power observes, power chooses, and power always cares just a little bit less. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I will catch you on the next one.